Back live in New York, I'm Brent Musburger. Let's go right to the scoreboard now. The showdown, Dallas and Pittsburgh. The Steelers were just on the march. They missed on a third down pass, and they are now attempting to kick a field goal that would put them ahead 10-3. The Dallas Cowboys can add 3 more points right now. Barr will attempt it for him. It is up, and he hooked that ball, didn't he? It is not there, so that score will stay 7-3 Pittsburgh. New Orleans, Washington, of course. The game you are watching, 14-10 at the half. The Saints lead Washington by 4. The Jets struck first. There's Detroit leading Buffalo by a score of 14-0. That game is in the second period. Comlo to Scott for their first touchdown. Now the Jet game. And it was Todd 39 yards to Wesley Walker. And it was Linhart who has kicked a field goal of 31 yards. Game just underway in the Midwest. Tampa Bay leading Minnesota by a score of 3-0. St. Louis leading Cleveland 6-0. A 72-yard fumble return by Steve Niels. They miss an extra point in that game. Baltimore, 8-yard run by Joe Washington, and they lead New England by a score of 7-0. The Heisman Trophy, who's going to win it? It's all but over, and it's not going to be the defending champion. If we rank the top 3, Charles White apparently has a stranglehold on the trophy. Billy Sims snapped back yesterday for Oklahoma with 4 touchdowns. Don't count out Vegas Ferguson. But if the pro scouts had their say, Perry Harrington would be their top choice right now. Out of Jackson State, the same school that produced marvelous Walter Payton. Billy Sims could be number 1, a close number 2. Curtis Dickey, the speedster from Texas A&M, would be number 3. And White would be 4th. Why so low for Charles? His size, they say, not quite big enough. LaRue Harrington, no relation to Perry, of Norfolk State, also is going to go on the first round of the pro draft. Irv, let's take a look at some highlights. You got that Dallas-Pittsburgh game.
Boy, I tell you, it's really a cliffhanger, too, though, Brent. 7-3 right now in the second quarter. The Pittsburgh Steelers are still ahead. The Dallas Cowboys have the game ball right now, late in the second quarter. But here's first half action. Bradshaw in the first quarter going upfield to John Stallworth, one of the big play guys in that Steelers team, taking the ball down to the 48-yard line. Rocky Blyers only played in spots, goes down to the 1-yard line, and from there, Franco Harris from this fullback spot, number 32, right up the middle, touchdown. And Pittsburgh, of course, leads right now 7-3 late in the second quarter.
Who is the number 1 deep threat in the National Football League? Maybe Wesley Walker? He has scored. How about Roy Jefferson for San Diego? Here is another candidate. Wes Chandler, number 89, and Manning hit him right there. Touchdown for the Saints. Now watch this sequence. Manning again on the scramble. He's looking for 89. Chandler's there. Watch the hit he takes after the catch. Tony Galbraith stormed in for the touchdown. And Theismann came back and got one. So it is 14-10. New Orleans leading the Redskins at the half. Back live in New York, I'm Brent Musburger, and for the time being, New Orleans is in first in the NFC West, and elsewhere around the league, Pittsburgh leading Dallas 14-3. It's a fierce game. Roger Staubach out with a concussion. Drew Pearson has just been carried off the field. Possible knee injury. We'll update. The game you just watched, the New Orleans Saints shut down on the Washington Redskins 14-10. The Saints' record now is 5-4. Detroit leading Buffalo 17-13 in the fourth. Chuck Knox's offense has come to life, though, down the stretch in that game, and there's still time. Elsewhere, it is Houston 24, Jets 10. Wesley Walker out, injured knee for the Jets after catching 4 for 111 yards. Minnesota battling, needing a win, leading Tampa Bay 10-3. They are in the third. Kramer to Stu Voigt, 2 yards out for the game's only touchdown. 13-10, Cardinals over the Browns. O.J. Anderson from 3 yards out. Greg Pruitt, knee injury. He is possibly lost for the rest of the season. And Baltimore, 17. New England, 13. That game is at the half. And let me correct, I said that was Drew Pearson. That is Preston Pearson, who was injured. As a matter of fact, let's go live to Pittsburgh if we can, if they are not yet in a commercial. Let's check out. Now, the Pittsburgh Steelers have dominated this game. Franco Harris scored on a 48-yard run for a touchdown. It was the second one. He also scored from 1 yard out. So he has their 2 touchdowns, and he's their lone setback, and here he is right straight ahead at the Dallas Cowboys. So the Cowboys have lost Roger Staubach and Preston Pearson, the running back. It is now confirmed it was an injury to the right knee. There's Harvey Martin, Lewis, and the rest of the Cowboy defense. And, of course, if they lose today, Then the Philadelphia Eagles can move into a tie for first. The NFC East, the Washington Redskins blowing a golden opportunity. Their record now 6-3. Cowboys came in at 7-1. As for the Steelers, they lead the AFC Central at 6-2. Game ahead of Cleveland and Houston. Houston winning right now. Here's Harris as they go to work on the clock. Leading 14-3. They have dominated the game. And we'll stay right there with the game.
Brady, the Pittsburgh Steelers have shown a funny pattern this year, playing extremely well against strong teams and sort of so-so against weak teams. There goes Franco Harris again, the only man to score touchdowns in this ball game, but they lost to Philadelphia, they lost to Cincinnati, and people will be beginning to say, what's wrong with the Pittsburgh Steelers? Well, there's nothing wrong with Pittsburgh as long as they're playing a contender. That's when they play their best.
Here's 2nd and 5 now for Bradshaw, who's taking his time, letting the clock tick down. 14-3. Cowboys have not scored a touchdown. 98 yards rushing for Harris. This is Sidney Thornton, the other part of the Bull backfield. Now, next for the Dallas Cowboys, they will come in to East Rutherford, New Jersey, and take on the New York Giants. Then the showdown with the Philadelphia Eagles. They still have 2 games remaining with the Eagles. Now, for fans down in New Orleans who are watching, they are very much aware that it is a tough road ahead for the Saints. NFC Western Division teams are matched against the AFC Western Division teams. And so far, New Orleans has not played Denver, San Diego, Oakland, and Seattle. The schedule ahead for the Saints is much tougher than the one remaining for the Los Angeles Rams. For example, the Rams this afternoon play the New York Giants in the Los Angeles Coliseum. A win would tie them with the Saints. So it is not going to be easy for New Orleans to get into the playoffs. Franco did not get the first down in that situation. He got about a yard, about 98 for the afternoon. And again, the Steelers are just working against the clock. There's the 2-minute warning. We'll keep you up to date on that game as it unfolds. And the NFL Today will continue on CBS in just a moment. Some of the stats are now in from the New Orleans game. Manning, 11 of 17 for 131 yards, the 1 touchdown pass to Chandler. Galbraith carried 21 times for 60 yards. Chandler only caught those 2 passes in the first half for 64 yards, and of course the 1 score. Now we are back live with 1:57 to go. The Steelers are going to turn it over to Danny White and the Cowboys. White has replaced the injured Roger Staubach. The punt goes out of bounds inside the 10-yard line. So the Cowboys are not going to get good field position. And again, they trail 14-3 is the count right now. And about 3 weeks ago, this Steeler team was embarrassed by the Cincinnati Bengals by 24 points, 34-10. It was no fun being a Steeler that following week. Chuck Knowles specialized in wind sprints. And he's got the Cowboys down now by a score of 14-3. Since that loss, they embarrassed Denver on a Monday night. Now they are dominating the NFC champion Dallas Cowboys. Number 11, Danny White, out of Arizona State. His opportunity now to drive the Cowboys back, but there does not appear to be much time. They would have to strike quickly, go for an onside kick, get it back, and then go in again. And the Pittsburgh defense has been awesome. Jack Lambert has been the last angry man this afternoon. From the shotgun, it's White. Deflected away, and that's the way it's been all game long. Now it'll be 2nd and 10. Dorsetterv has played well. He just hasn't been able to beat the last man.
He's played well. He's had a couple of runs where he almost broke out and went the difference. But again, Brent, that's what happens when you play against a great defensive team. There's Greenwood right there. He's had a big day, and he was the man responsible for knocking out Roger Staubach. But you know, a team like Pittsburgh just keeps coming in waves. You get past one wave, you think you're going to break free, and before you know it, bang, the linebacker wave hits you. You break through, and you think you're going to go, and the deep secondary wave hits you. They just keep pursuing and they simply intimidate an offensive ball club.
2nd and 10 now for Danny White. Eyes that tough Steeler defense. Long way to go from the shotgun. Complete. And Ron Springs may have just had the first down. He was close to the marker over there on the far side. And, of course, we have just finished the New Orleans victory over Washington, 14-10. That was one of the faster games of the year. Now you're watching live. There was the final score. New Orleans runs its record now to 5-4 in the NFC West. And in the NFC East, Washington slips to 6-3. Philadelphia plays Cincinnati. That game will be starting in about 12 minutes. And the Los Angeles Rams are matched against the New York Giants. So with the first down for the Cowboys, Danny White will come up on the outside. Of course, he still has Drew Pearson. He has lost Preston Pearson, who's out with a knee injury, and they have Tony Hill. After we watch this game conclude, we'll show you some highlights from around the league. He goes underneath to the running back, springs again. So they first use springs to the left and come back with him to the right, Irv.
You know, in that scouting report we did on the Pittsburgh Steelers last Monday night when they played Denver, Gil Brandt told me that in this kind of a situation, they'll come in with 3 down defensive linemen, go in with 5 linebackers and 4 deep backs, and it's very difficult to throw deep on them. They'll give you the short stuff, not the deep one.
Trying, and they've got Saldi incomplete. Jay Saldi probably should have had that ball. He was turned around to get him behind. There he is, number 58. And what an afternoon Jack Lambert has turned in for Chuck Noll and the Steelers. And of course, in this situation, when they know that the Cowboys have to pass, they just simply drop the linebackers off, get pressure on with 3-4 men. Well, that's a great defensive play. Winston coming out from the side, too, to help out. 1:05 left. Rematch of Super Bowl 13, perhaps the best Super Bowl played. In fact, these two teams have engaged in 2 dandies. Super Bowl 10 was down in Miami, too, and the Steelers have handled the Cowboys both times.
They've played the Cowboys in 3 games when it really counted, twice in the Super Bowl and once during the regular season, and they're 3-0, Brent.
Danny White, sidearm, first down at midfield. And Drew Pearson with that catch.
On the pass rush, again, a 3-man rush, pretty good pressure. But White staying in the pocket, has ample protection there as he looks upfield and finds Drew Pearson in the curl in. All he's trying to do is settle between the linebackers here, and he finds a spot, makes the catch. Number 31, Shell, brings him down.
All right, the NFL today will continue on CBS in just a moment. At 6-2, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers lead Minnesota by a couple of games. We've got that game up. Let's go out live and check into Bloomington, Minnesota. It is a 3rd and 11 now for Doug Williams and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And Bud Grant has sent an extra defensive back onto the field. That's a 4th period score right there. Detroit ahead of Buffalo, still 17-13. And Joe Ferguson, though, is driving the Bills. They are near midfield in that game. Here's the 3rd down for Doug. Run out of the pocket, intense pressure by the Vikes, throws it down deep, and it's out of bounds. He just simply threw it out to stop the clock in this situation. Again, it is 10-3, Minnesota leading the Buccaneers, the Vikes at 4-4. Kramer hits Stu Voigt from 2 yards out. That's the only touchdown so far in this game. Minnesota probably the only team in that division that can still overhaul Tampa Bay. Let's show you some of the early moments from the Pittsburgh game against the Dallas Cowboys. Irv?
Okay, late in the 4th quarter, of course, the Pittsburgh Steelers are still winning that game, 14-3. And in the first half, it was Terry Bradshaw going to number 84, John Stallworth, upfield, making a big play to get their offensive drive going. Stallworth, probably one of the most unheralded, underrated wide receivers in football, always seems to come up with a big play. Here he is right here in the first quarter. Bradshaw hitting him down to the 48-yard line, setting up a running play by number 20, Rocky Bleier, who goes off his left guard down to the 1-yard line. And Franco Harris, number 32, the only man to score touchdowns today, gets his first one there, 7-0 Pittsburgh. Danny White, late in the 2nd quarter, calls a fake punt in the huddle on his own. Not Tom Landry calling his play. Throws a pass, incomplete, but the Dallas defense holds. And Pittsburgh takes over here again, and there's another series of plays in the 3rd quarter rather. Franco Harris going 48 yards for a touchdown, and Pittsburgh has a 14-3 lead, and everybody likes it. Here's a play where Staubach was injured. Now watch number 68 here. He's kind of wandering around, and all of a sudden Greenwood comes out of nowhere. They hit helmet to helmet, and Staubach is knocked a little unconscious there, and he has a little concussion right now. He'll be okay, as we've been reported to us, but he is down with an injury and out for the remainder of the game today. And then later in the game, another man injured, Preston Pearson, one of the most reliable receivers in football, goes out with a knee injury, and that's pretty much the story. The Pittsburgh Steelers lead that game late in the 4th quarter, 14-3, and the Dallas Cowboys are banged up.
In effect, it is over, Irv. The Steelers are going to get the ball back. Danny White couldn't get it in. They can run it out. They're ahead 14-3. So there's going to be no contest there. An awful lot of good games about ready to start. Coming up at 4 o'clock, the key doubleheader matchups, and the fans down in New Orleans who are delighted that the Saints were able to win again, of course, will be watching the score of the Los Angeles Rams, see what they can do against the New York Giants. The Giants have been red hot lately. Now, to wrap up the Washington-New Orleans story, let's send you back to Gary Bender at RFK Stadium in Washington. Gary?
Thank you, Brent, very much. And it was a 14-10 win for the New Orleans Saints. They now are 5-4, and as you said, waiting on the outcome of that Rams-Giants game. Sonny, it's interesting to note that the Saints have 3 road games in the next 4 weeks. But you know what they are on the road this year? They're 3-1, and a big win here today.
It shows you the improvement in this football team, because they used to play very poorly on the road. And I think from talking with those guys after the game, they believe in themselves, and I think they're going to be heard from the rest of the year.
Well, let's look at the stats. Now, some things are very equal, but I think one of the interesting things was that the Redskins had only 47 yards passing.
That's true. You have to give the credit to that secondary. Theismann did have a lot of time at times to throw the football, but he was sacked 7 times, but only 8 out of 16 for 47 yards. Give the defense credit for stopping that.
Well, we were checking while we were away, and we found out in the second half alone, Sonny, the Redskins had the ball on 15 different plays inside the 10-yard line, and that shows you how tough that Saints defense was.
Boy, for them to come up and make the play, they say you have to make the play in the crucial situation. Their defense made it all day long. And as we mentioned to them, you think of this team as an outstanding offensive football team, scoring 197 points coming into this game. But today, I think their defense got a great deal of respect.
Well, they had 6 sacks before the day was over. I also checked back. In the first quarter, there was another drive where the Redskins had the ball 9 plays. They eventually ended up with a field goal. 2 big blocks in this game. Mark Mosley had a field goal block, and also Garo Yepremian, a little guy who makes the neckties, had his string of 20 straight, an NFL record snapped. But as you look back on that play again, it was good defense on both blocks.
I tell you, just watching the plays all day as we talked during the game, the momentum shifting back and forth, Gary, it was amazing. The Redskins being in there the way they were, having all those opportunities inside of the 10-yard line, as you pointed out 15 times. I don't think they're pleased with the way they played football today. They're 6-3. This is where they started their skid last year. But even though they had the ball in there that many times, they still had an opportunity to win the game right at the end of the game, and you got to give the credit to the Saints. They came up and made the play when they had to.
Sonny, you and I both talked to the Redskins. They were scared of this game. They were concerned about it. They were really not happy with the intensity they had in practice all week long. I'm not taking anything away from New Orleans, but it was a dangerous situation for Washington.
Well, that's true. We talked at the beginning of the game. We said they were confident but cautious, and cautious they were. Even talking to the coaches on the field before the game, they weren't as confident as I've heard them before other games this year, and they had reason to be so, because they didn't play as they wanted to play, but they were scared of the very talented New Orleans Saints football team.
Okay, well, it's not going to get any easier for Washington. It's Pittsburgh next week, and you know what they're doing to the Dallas Cowboys today. And as mentioned, it's going to be very tough for the New Orleans Saints, because they go west to meet the Denver Broncos, then return against San Francisco, and they're at Seattle. So a big win here in RFK Stadium. A win of 14-10 for the New Orleans Saints. For Sonny Jurgensen, this is Gary Bender saying so long. Stay tuned as the NFL Today continues after this word from your local station.